I knew something was off the second I walked into Patricia's office. Her smile was too wide, her eyes too bright, like a predator sizing up its next meal. "Marissa, come in, come in. Close the door behind you." I smoothed my skirt and took the seat across from her desk, trying to ignore the flutter in my stomach. 5 years as her protégée, and I still got nervous in these one-on-ones. "I've been reviewing your work on the Westlake acquisition." Patricia tapped manicured nails against a folder. "Impressive analysis. Very thorough." The knot in my chest loosened slightly. I'd spent 3 sleepless weeks on that report. "Thank you. I really think their portfolio complements our—" "Which is why," she continued as if I hadn't spoken, "I've decided you're the perfect person for a special assignment." Patricia leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "The board wants a comprehensive strategy overhaul. Something revolutionary. I told them you're the only one who could deliver." My pulse quickened. This was it, the opportunity I'd been waiting for. A direct line to the board meant visibility, recognition, maybe even that VP position opening next quarter. "I'm honored," I said, working to keep my voice steady. "When do we present?" "That's the thing." Patricia's smile tightened at the corners. "We need absolute focus. No distractions. I've arranged for us to use my cabin upstate for the weekend. Just you and me hammering out the framework." A work retreat? My weekend plans evaporated, but this was Patricia Howard asking, the woman who'd plucked me from middle management obscurity, the woman whose career I'd been studying like a religious text. "Of course." "When do we leave?" "Friday after work. Pack light." She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, and keep this between us for now. No need to make Ralph jealous that I've chosen you over him for this." I nodded, ignoring the prickle at the back of my neck. Ralph had been gunning for Patricia's attention since I could remember. The cabin was nothing like I expected. Less rustic retreat, more luxury showpiece with its wall of windows overlooking the lake. Patricia had disappeared into her room an hour ago with a migraine, leaving me alone with my laptop and a half-empty wine glass. I checked my phone again. No service. The isolation that had seemed so productive this morning now felt deliberate. "Focus, Marissa," I muttered, opening the company files Patricia had asked me to review. But something nagged at me. Why drive 3 hours to review documents we could have discussed in the office? I paced the great room, running through our conversations from the past week. Patricia had been oddly distant during meetings, cutting me off mid-presentation twice. I'd attributed it to stress over the quarterly numbers, but now, a notification pinged on my laptop, Patricia's calendar syncing with mine. I clicked it automatically, then froze. Board presentation, Westlake restructuring strategy. Monday, 9 a.m. Monday. That was 3 days away. If we were presenting Monday, why weren't we prepping the actual slides instead of reviewing background materials? I scrolled through the calendar invite. My name wasn't listed as a presenter, only Patricia's. My stomach clenched. This didn't make sense. Unless... The cabin door creaked open and I quickly closed the calendar. "Working hard?" Patricia appeared in silk pajamas, looking remarkably migraine-free. "Just reviewing the Westlake numbers again." I forced a smile. "Actually, I noticed the board presentation is scheduled for Monday. Shouldn't we be finalizing the deck?" Something flashed across her face. Annoyance? Concern? "Oh, that's just a preliminary discussion. The real presentation is next month," she waved dismissively. "Don't worry about it. Focus on the analysis I asked for." I nodded, but the lie hung between us like smoke. There was no second presentation on the calendar. After Patricia returned to her room, I sat motionless, my mind racing. 5 years of trust battled against mounting evidence. I'd built my career following her lead, absorbing her wisdom, believing her when she said I was being groomed for leadership. Against my better judgment, I opened her laptop. Patricia had left it on the kitchen counter, still logged in. Just a quick check, I told myself, just to confirm I was being paranoid. Her email loaded and my blood turned to ice. Ralph attached his Marissa's Westlake analysis with my revisions. I've removed her name and will present it as my work on Monday. The board will love it. And with her out of the way this weekend, she won't know until it's too late. Once they approve the acquisition based on my strategy, that VP position is as good as mine. P.S. Make sure her access to the shared drive is restricted until after the presentation. Can't have her causing problems. The cabin suddenly felt airless. My hands trembled as I took screenshots, forwarding them to my personal email. 5 years of loyalty, countless late nights, all so Patricia could steal my work and push me aside. I closed the laptop carefully, exactly as she'd left it. My mind was already calculating, planning. Patricia had taught me many things over the years, including how to play the long game. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the cabin sent me bolt upright, convinced Patricia had somehow discovered me looking through her emails. By morning, I'd rehearsed a dozen confrontations in my head, each ending with me triumphantly exposing her betrayal. But I didn't say a word during the silent drive back to the city. Patricia chatted about office politics, seemingly oblivious to my one-word responses. I needed time to think, to plan. Confronting her now, isolated in her car, would be strategic suicide. "I'm so pleased with our progress this weekend," she said as we pulled up to my apartment building. "You've given me exactly what I needed." I bet I have, I thought, forcing a smile that felt like cracked glass on my face. "See you bright and early tomorrow." She patted my hand with cold fingers. "Big week ahead." Monday morning arrived with a knot of dread in my stomach. The office hummed with its usual energy, but everything felt different, tainted. I noticed details I'd overlooked before, how the junior associates averted their eyes when I passed, how conversations halted when I approached the break room. They knew something I didn't. "Morning, Marissa." Ralph's voice stopped me as I reached my office. He leaned against my doorframe, coffee in hand, his usual smirk replaced with something almost like pity. "Ralph." I kept my voice neutral, remembering his name in Patricia's email. Co-conspirator. Traitor. "Productive weekend?" He raised an eyebrow. "Very." I set my bag down, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. "Patricia and I made significant progress." "Interesting." He sipped his coffee. "Because Patricia's been telling everyone you were on personal leave while she finished the Westlake presentation herself." My fingers froze on my keyboard. So that was the official story. "The board meeting starts in 20 minutes, he continued. "Patricia specifically said you weren't needed." "Did she?" I met his eyes directly. "Funny, since the entire strategy is based on my analysis." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe even a hint of respect. He hadn't expected me to know. "Well, that's between you and her, isn't it?" He straightened. "Just thought you should know what you're walking into." After he left, I sat motionless, mind racing. Patricia expected me to discover the theft after the meeting when it would be too late. She didn't know I'd seen the emails, didn't know I had proof. But confronting her publicly would be my word against hers. And she had the board's ear. I needed to be smarter than that. I grabbed my tablet and headed for the conference room. I slipped into the board meeting just as Patricia was beginning her presentation. Her momentary look of shock when she saw me was almost worth the weekend of deception. "Marissa," she recovered smoothly, "this is a closed session." "I apologize for the confusion," I said, taking the empty seat beside Andres, the oldest board member. "But since we're discussing the Westlake acquisition strategy I developed, I thought I should be present." Patricia's smile tightened. "As I was explaining to the board, while your preliminary work was helpful, I've completely restructured the approach." She clicked to the first slide and I felt the air leave my lungs. There it was, my analysis, my strategic framework, my financial projections, all with Patricia's name in the footer. For the next 30 minutes, I watched her present my work as her own. Each slide was a fresh betrayal, each point stolen from my late nights and early mornings. The board members nodded approvingly, occasionally glancing at me with confusion or dismissal. When she reached the risk assessment section, the innovative approach I'd developed specifically for this acquisition, I couldn't stay silent. "Excuse me," I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt. "Could you explain how you developed that risk matrix? It seems remarkably similar to the one I created last month." The room went silent. Patricia's eyes narrowed fractionally. "As I mentioned earlier, I built upon some of your preliminary ideas," she said smoothly. "But this methodology is one I've been developing for years." "Really?" I kept my tone light, curious. "Because I based it on a Harvard Business Review article that was only published 6 weeks ago." A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. She hadn't read the source material. "Perhaps we're thinking of different articles," she recovered. Now, if we could continue without further interruptions, the meeting concluded with unanimous approval for Patricia's my strategy. As board members filed out, Patricia cornered me by the door. "My office. Now." Her whisper was razor-sharp. Behind closed doors, her facade dropped completely. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" she hissed. "I could ask you the same question." I met her gaze. "That was my work, Patricia. Every slide, every insight, every recommendation. Prove it." Her smile was venomous. "Your name isn't on any of it. And, as of this morning, your original files have been removed from the server." My stomach dropped. She'd been thorough. "You can't possibly think you'll get away with this." "I already have." She leaned back against her desk. "The board loves the strategy. The acquisition is moving forward. And you've just demonstrated to everyone that you're unstable, jealous, and desperate for credit." She opened her door, dismissing me. "I'd start updating your resume, Marissa. Your future at this company is limited." I walked out, past curious stares and whispered conversations. My career, my reputation, everything I'd built was crumbling around me. But Patricia had made one critical mistake. She'd taught me too well. That night, I sat cross-legged on my bed, laptop balanced on my knees, and opened a blank document. At the top, I typed, "The truth about Patricia Howard," then paused, fingers hovering over the keys. "Start at the beginning," I whispered to myself. "Document everything." I began typing furiously, every interaction, every project, every subtle undermining comment Patricia had made over the years. Patterns emerged that I'd been too loyal to see. The promising junior analysts who mysteriously transferred after impressing senior leadership. The ideas Patricia had workshopped with me privately before presenting them as her own. The way she isolated her favorites, creating dependency while harvesting their best work. I'd been blind. Willfully, stupidly blind. 3 hours and 12 pages later, my phone buzzed with a text from Sandra. "You alive? Haven't heard from you since the weekend. Drinks tomorrow?" Sandra, my best friend since business school. The one person who might actually believe me. "Desperately need to talk. My place tomorrow after work," I replied. Her response came immediately. "Bringing wine, lots of it." "She did what?" Sandra's outrage filled my small living room as I finished recounting the weekend's events. She paced back and forth, wineglass dangerously close to sloshing over. "I knew Patricia was calculating, but this is next-level sociopathic." She dropped onto my couch. "Please tell me you're going to HR." I shook my head. HR reports directly to Patricia, and without proof, it's my word against hers. "But you said you have screenshots of her emails, obtained by accessing her laptop without permission." I sighed. Corporate espionage is still worse than plagiarism in the eyes of the board. Sandra studied me over the rim of her glass. "So what's your plan?" "Because I know you have one. You've got that look." "What look?" "The same one you had before you destroyed Professor Jenkins in the ethics debate final year." She leaned forward. "The I'm about to burn everything down look." I smiled despite myself. "I need to be smart about this. Patricia's been playing this game longer than I have. I need irrefutable evidence that she stole my work, evidence I obtained legally." "And how exactly do you plan to get that?" I reached for my phone and pulled up the voice memo app. I'm going to get her to admit it. The next morning I arrived at the office an hour early, my phone in my pocket with the recording app ready. My heart hammered against my ribs as I rehearsed what I'd say to Patricia. Direct enough to provoke a response, not so confrontational that she'd immediately shut down. But Patricia's office remained dark all morning. By noon, whispers circulated that she was in closed-door meetings with the CEO about fast-tracking the Westlake acquisition. My carefully planned confrontation would have to wait. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my evidence. I reached out to IT about recovering my deleted files, claiming I'd accidentally removed some important documents. "Sorry, Marissa," the tech responded. "Those files were permanently deleted from the server. Looks like it happened Sunday night through an admin account." Of course, Patricia had covered her tracks. I spent the afternoon reconstructing my original analysis from memory and personal notes, documenting the timeline of my work. If I couldn't prove she stole it, I could at least demonstrate I'd created it first. As I worked, Ralph appeared in my doorway. "Burning the midnight oil?" he asked, eyeing my frantic typing. "Just catching up." I didn't look up. He lingered, shifting his weight. "Look, about yesterday's board meeting." "Save it." I finally met his eyes. "You knew what she was doing." "It's complicated." He stepped inside, closing my door. "Patricia has a way of making you feel like you don't have a choice." "There's always a choice, Ralph. Easy to say when you've been her golden child for 5 years. Bitterness edged his voice. "Some of us have had to fight for every scrap of recognition." I stared at him, really seeing him for the first time, the permanent tension in his shoulders, the careful way he monitored the hallway through my office window. He was afraid of her too. "How long has she been doing this?" I asked quietly. "Taking credit for others' work?" He laughed humorlessly. "Since before you arrived, it's how she made partner so young. And everyone just accepts it. Those who don't usually find themselves restructured out of the company." His expression hardened. "Like I said, complicated." After Ralph left, I sat motionless, processing this new information. Patricia's behavior wasn't just opportunistic theft, it was systematic. A career built on stolen ideas and silenced voices. My phone buzzed with a text from Sandra. "Any progress today?" I was about to respond when another message appeared, this one from an unknown number. "I know what Patricia did. Meet me at Blackbird Coffee tomorrow, 7 a.m. Come alone." "Zast zet?" I scrolled through my mental contact list. The only Zay at the company was Zuriel, the new strategic analyst Patricia had been mentoring. The one who'd been increasingly present in meetings where I was now excluded. Patricia's replacement for me. I stared at the message. Possibilities unfolding. If Zuriel knew about Patricia's methods, maybe others did too. Maybe I wasn't as alone in this fight as I thought. I texted Sandra back. "Just found a potential ally. Will update tomorrow." For the first time since discovering Patricia's betrayal, I felt something other than rage and helplessness. I felt hope. Blackbird Coffee buzzed with early morning energy as I claimed a corner table, arriving 15 minutes before the scheduled meeting time. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with questions about Zuriel's message. Was it a trap? Had Patricia sent her to gather ammunition against me? I nursed my Americano, scanning each new arrival until I spotted her, tall with close-cropped hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Zuriel moved with quiet confidence, ordering at the counter before approaching my table. "Marissa," she nodded, sliding into the seat across from me. "Thank you for coming." "Your message was intriguing." I studied her face, searching for signs of deception. "How exactly do you know what Patricia did?" Zuriel took a sip of her coffee, eyes never leaving mine. "Because she's doing the same thing to me that she did to you. Only I noticed faster." My skepticism must have shown on my face. 2 weeks ago, Patricia asked me to develop a risk assessment model for the Westlake integration, she continued. "I worked around the clock on it. Yesterday, I discovered she's presented it to the integration team as her own framework." "And you have proof?" I asked, hope fluttering in my chest. "Better." Zuriel pulled out her phone, opening a recording app. "I have her confession." She pressed play, and Patricia's unmistakable voice filled our corner of the cafe. "Of course I used your model, Zuriel. That's how this works. I mentor promising talent, and in return, I get fresh ideas that keep me ahead of the curve. Did you think you were special? Ask Marissa how it works if you don't believe me. 5 years she's been giving me her best work. My hands trembled around my coffee cup. Hearing Patricia so casually confirm her theft made my blood boil and freeze simultaneously. When did you record this? I asked, my voice barely steady. Yesterday afternoon, after I confronted her about the integration plan. Zuriel's expression hardened. She thought she could buy me off with promises of advancement. What she doesn't know is that I've been documenting everything since my 2nd week. Why are you showing me this? Because we have the same enemy. She leaned forward. And because you've been fighting her longer than I have. I want in on whatever you're planning. I studied her, weighing possibilities. This recording is damning, but it's only about your work, not mine. And using it could backfire. Recording conversations without consent is legally questionable. I'm aware of the risks. Zuriel's gaze was unflinching. But I didn't leave my previous job and move across the country to have my work stolen by some corporate vampire. For the first time in days, I felt the ghost of a smile. Corporate vampire. That's exactly what she is. We spent the next hour comparing notes, building a timeline of Patricia's theft. Zuriel was methodical, strategic, qualities I recognized in myself. By the time we left, we had the outline of a plan. You're working with who? Sandra's voice rose an octave as we sat in her living room that evening. Marissa, you barely know this woman. What if she's playing you? She has evidence, Sandra. I paced the length of her couch. And her story matches exactly what Patricia did to me. Or she researched what happened to you and is using it to gain your trust. Sandra crossed her arms. Have you considered that Patricia might have sent her to trap you? I stopped pacing. The thought had crossed my mind, but Zuriel's anger had seemed too genuine to fake. I'm being careful, I insisted. But this is the first real lead I've had. Sandra sighed, her expression softening. I'm worried about you. You're not sleeping, you're obsessing over Patricia. This isn't healthy, Marissa. What would you have me do? Just let her get away with it? Watch while she destroys my career? Of course not. But there are other jobs, other companies. Maybe the healthiest thing would be to walk away. I stared at her, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. You think I should give up? I think you should protect yourself. She reached for my hand. Patricia has all the power here. The longer you fight, the more damage she can do. I pulled away, hurt blooming beneath my anger. I expected you of all people to understand why I can't just walk away. And I expected you to recognize when you're putting revenge above your own well-being. Her voice sharpened. This isn't just about Patricia stealing your work anymore. It's about you needing to win at any cost. Her words hit like a physical blow. Was she right? Had my justified anger morphed into something darker? I have to see this through, I said finally. If I don't stand up to her, she'll just keep doing this to others. Sandra's expression was a mixture of concern and resignation. Just promise me you won't cross any lines you can't uncross. I nodded, but we both knew it was a promise I might not be able to keep. The next morning, I arrived at work to find my office door ajar. Inside, Patricia sat in my chair, scrolling through my computer. Ah, Marissa. She didn't even pretend to be embarrassed. I was just checking on your progress with the quarterly projections. By accessing my computer without permission? I kept my voice level, fighting the urge to snatch my laptop away from her. As department head, I have access to all resources. Her smile was glacial. Including yours, she stood, smoothing her immaculate suit. By the way, I've decided to have Zuriel take over your client portfolio. You seem overwhelmed lately. My stomach dropped. She was systematically stripping away my responsibilities. Effective immediately, she added, brushing past me. I've already informed the clients. After she left, I sank into my chair, staring at my now empty calendar. Patricia wasn't just stealing my work, she was erasing me entirely. My phone buzzed with a text from Zuriel. Emergency. Patricia just gave me your entire portfolio. Meeting in 10 Mine to discuss transition. What's your play? I typed back, let her think she's winning. Time to accelerate our plan. Whatever doubts Sandra had planted vanished in the face of Patricia's latest move. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about survival. Rain lashed against my apartment windows as I spread our evidence across my living room floor. 2 weeks of meticulous collection had yielded a mosaic of Patricia's deception. Email threads, meeting notes, timestamps proving I'd created documents before she authored them. Zuriel had contributed her own documentation, including the damning audio recording. It still wasn't enough. I pressed my palms against my eyes, exhaustion seeping into my bones. Patricia had been systematically isolating me at work, reassigning my projects, excluding me from meetings. Yesterday, I'd overheard 2 associates whispering about my mental health issues. The rumour mill was churning exactly as Patricia intended. My phone rang. Sandra, for the 3rd time today. I let it go to voicemail. Our last conversation had left a wound that hadn't healed. She thought I was destroying myself for revenge. I couldn't make her understand this was about justice. A sharp knock at my door startled me. Through the peephole, I saw Zuriel, rain-drenched and grim-faced. "Sorry to show up unannounced," she said when I opened the door. But this couldn't wait. She handed me a tablet displaying an internal memo. My heart sank as I read. Effective immediately, Marissa Lane is being placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into violations of company confidentiality policies. All access credentials have been suspended. "She's making her move," Zuriel said quietly. "The evidence of your supposed violations is being presented to the board tomorrow morning." I sank onto my couch, the memo blurring before my eyes. "What evidence? I haven't violated anything." "According to Patricia, you accessed confidential client information without authorization and attempted to contact Westlake executives directly." Zuriel sat beside me. "She has emails." "That's impossible. I never—" "She fabricated them, Marissa." Zuriel's voice hardened. "Just like she fabricated the risk assessment you supposedly bungled." My mind raced. Administrative leave was corporate purgatory. Not fired, but effectively sidelined while your reputation disintegrated. By the time any investigation concluded, I'd be professionally radioactive. "We need to move now," I said, gathering the scattered evidence. "Before tomorrow's board meeting." Zuriel nodded. "I have something that might help. Andres from the board reached out to me yesterday. He wants to meet." I froze. "Andres? Why would he contact you?" "Apparently I'm not the first replacement Patricia has groomed." Her expression was unreadable. "And Andres has been watching her pattern for some time." The upscale bar was nearly empty when we arrived. Andres sat alone in a corner booth, looking more like a tired grandfather than a powerful board member. His eyes sharpened as we approached. "Ms. Lane, Ms. Fox." He gestured to the seats across from him. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. Your timing is either impeccable or suspicious," I said, sliding into the booth. "Depending on why we're here." A faint smile crossed his face. "Direct. Good. We don't have time for anything else." He slid a folder across the table. "Patricia is presenting this to the board tomorrow morning. I thought you should see it first." Inside was a complete termination package with my name on it. Not administrative leave, but immediate dismissal for cause. The evidence included emails I'd never written and meeting notes I'd never taken. "This is all fabricated," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I know." Andres' calm response surprised me. "Patricia has used this playbook before." "Then why has the board allowed it to continue?" Zuriel demanded. Andres sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 60-plus years. "Politics? Patricia has powerful allies, and until recently, no one has been willing to stand against her with concrete evidence." "We have evidence," I said, reaching for my bag. Andres held up his hand. "Not here. Tomorrow before the board meeting. Bring everything you have." He leaned forward. Patricia doesn't know I've seen her termination proposal. She thinks I'm still firmly in her corner. Why are you helping us? I asked, suspicion threading through my relief. Because 20 years ago, I was you. His eyes met mine, and no one stood up for me. After Andres left, Zuriel and I sat in stunned silence. Do we trust him? She finally asked. I don't know. I stared at the termination papers. But right now, he's our only chance. I couldn't sleep that night. Rain continued to pound against my windows as I reviewed our evidence for the 100th time. If Andres was setting us up, tomorrow would end my career permanently. My phone lit up with a text from Sandra. I know you're angry with me, but please call. I'm worried about you. Guilt twisted in my stomach. I'd been shutting out the one person who'd always had my back, all because she'd voiced concerns about my obsession with Patricia. I dialed her number before I could change my mind. Marissa, she answered immediately, relief evident in her voice. Are you okay? Not really. My voice cracked. Patricia's trying to have me fired tomorrow. For cause. What? That's insane. On what grounds? I explained the fabricated evidence, Andres' unexpected alliance, our plan to confront Patricia before the board. This is exactly what I was afraid of, Sandra said when I finished. She's escalating because you're threatening her. So I should just let her destroy my career. Bitterness crept into my voice. No. Her response was firm. You should destroy hers first. I blinked in surprise. What happened to walk away for your own well-being? That was before she fabricated evidence to have you fired. Sandra's tone hardened. Some lines shouldn't be crossed. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight on my chest lighten slightly. I could use your help tomorrow, if you're offering. Tell me when and where. After we hung up, I stared at the evidence spread across my floor. Tomorrow would change everything, for better or worse. Patricia had taught me to anticipate every contingency, to always have a backup plan. I opened my laptop and began to type an email to the entire board. If Andres betrayed us, if Patricia managed to silence us in the meeting, this would be my insurance policy. My finger hovered over the send button. Once I scheduled this email, there would be no turning back. I thought of Patricia's smug smile as she sat in my office, the casual cruelty with which she'd dismantled my career, the others before me who'd suffered the same fate. I scheduled the email for noon tomorrow, right when the board meeting would be ending. Whatever happened in that boardroom, Patricia's reign was over. Morning arrived with unforgiving clarity. I dressed with deliberate care, charcoal suit, crisp white blouse, the pearl earrings my grandmother left me. Armor for the battle ahead. My phone buzzed with a text from Zuriel. Andres confirmed. 8:30 in the executive conference room. Patricia arrives at 9. 30 minutes to make our case before Patricia could interrupt. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. As I gathered our evidence, my hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the weight of what I was about to do. Taking down Patricia meant exposing the company's toxic culture, questioning the board's oversight, potentially damaging the firm's reputation. People beyond Patricia would be hurt. Was I ready for that? My doorbell rang. Sandra stood outside holding coffee and a determined expression. Ready for war? She asked, handing me a cup. As I'll ever be. I managed a tight smile. Thanks for coming. Where else would I be? She squeezed my arm. Someone has to make sure you don't commit actual murder in that boardroom. The joke fell flat as we both recognized the truth beneath it. The line between justice and vengeance had been blurring for weeks. Sandra, I hesitated. If this goes wrong, it won't. Her certainty steadied me. But if it does, we'll face it together. The executive conference room was intimidatingly large, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Andres was already there, along with Zuriel and, to my surprise, Ralph. What is he doing here? I demanded, stopping short. Ralph raised his hands defensively. I'm on your side, Marissa. Since when? My voice dripped with skepticism. Last I checked, you were Patricia's willing accomplice. Things change. His eyes darted to Andres. I've been helping Andres gather evidence for months. I turned to Andres, who nodded confirmation. Ralph came to me after Patricia took credit for his restructuring plan last year. He's been documenting her patterns ever since. The revelation left me momentarily speechless. Ralph, competitive, ambitious Ralph, had been working against Patricia all this time. Why didn't you tell me? I asked him. Would you have trusted me? His question hung in the air. Answer obvious to us both. We don't have time for this, Zuriel interrupted, checking her watch. The other board members will be here in 10 minutes. We quickly arranged our evidence on the conference table, my documentation, Zuriel's recordings, Ralph's timeline of Patricia's thefts, and Andres's collection of previous incidents. Together, they painted a damning picture of systematic intellectual theft and workplace manipulation. One thing before we start, Andres said gravely. The board respects Patricia. She's delivered consistent results for years. This won't be easy. They'll respect results built on stolen work, Sandra asked incredulously. They might not care how the results came about, Ralph said. That's our biggest hurdle. His words sent a chill through me. What if the board knew about Patricia's methods and simply didn't care? What if they valued outcomes over ethics? Before I could voice these doubts, the door opened and 3 board members entered, followed by the CEO. Their expressions ranged from curious to annoyed as Andres explained the purpose of the meeting. This is highly irregular, Andres, one of them commented, eyeing our evidence with suspicion. So is systematically stealing employees' work, I replied, stepping forward, which is exactly what Patricia Howard has been doing for years. I launched into our presentation, methodically walking them through the evidence. With each piece, I watched their expressions shift from skepticism to concern. When Zuriel played her recording of Patricia's admission, the room fell silent. Why are we just hearing about this now? The CEO finally asked. Because Patricia isolates her victims, Ralph explained, makes them doubt themselves, and because the company rewards results without questioning methods. The CEO frowned. These are serious allegations against one of our top performers. We'll need time to... The door swung open, and Patricia walked in, stopping abruptly at the sight of us all gathered around our evidence. What is this? Her gaze swept the room, landing on me with laser focus. The truth, I said simply. For a moment, something like fear flickered across her face. Then her composure returned, and she smiled. That same predatory smile I'd seen countless times. Marissa has been struggling since I reassigned her portfolio, she told the board smoothly. This display only confirms my concerns about her stability. That's not going to work this time, Patricia, Andres said. We have evidence. Evidence obtained illegally, she countered, pointing to Zuriel's recording. And manipulated emails that prove nothing except Marissa's desperation. She turned to me, voice dripping with false sympathy. I tried to mentor you, to guide your career. And this is how you repay me? With fabricated accusations? The familiar twist of her logic made my blood boil. This was her specialty, turning accusations back on the accuser, making victims seem unstable or ungrateful. You didn't mentor me, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. You used me. You stole my work. And when I threatened your position, you tried to destroy me. Prove it. Her challenge hung in the air, and suddenly I realized her strategy. She was betting that without absolute, irrefutable proof, the board would side with her established track record over my accusations. That our evidence, while compelling, wouldn't be enough to overcome her years of political maneuvering. She might be right, unless... Ralph, I said quietly, show them. Ralph hesitated, then pulled out his phone. Patricia doesn't just steal work, he told the board. She actively sabotages anyone she sees as a threat. He pressed play on a recording I hadn't heard before, Patricia's voice unmistakable and damning. Of course I fabricated the evidence against Marissa. She was getting too close to the truth. The board will believe whatever I tell them. They always do. By this time tomorrow, her career will be over. Patricia's face drained of colour. That's not real. He doctored that recording. But the damage was done. I watched the board members exchange glances, saw the CEO's expression harden. "I think we've heard enough," he said. "Patricia, please wait outside while we discuss this matter." As she left, shooting daggers at us with her eyes, I turned to Ralph in disbelief. "When did you record that?" "Yesterday." His expression was grim. "After she asked me to testify against you at today's meeting." The realization hit me like a physical blow. Patricia had been planning to use Ralph against me, and he'd turned the tables on her completely. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of debts paid and bridges potentially mended. As the board began their deliberation, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and hollowness. The end was in sight, but the cost had been enormous. And Patricia, cornered and desperate, was far from defeated. The board's deliberation stretched into an excruciating hour. We waited in the adjacent conference room, the silence between us heavy with unspoken tension. Sandra paced by the windows while Zuriel scrolled through her phone, her expression unreadable. Ralph stood apart from us, as if uncertain of his welcome, despite his crucial role in our alliance. I sat motionless, my mind racing through possible outcomes. Even with Ralph's recording, Patricia had years of relationships and political capital with the board. Corporate justice rarely followed clean moral lines. What if it's not enough? I finally voiced the fear gnawing at me. What if they decide the company's interests are better served by keeping her? "Then we go public," Zuriel said without looking up. "I have contacts at the Wall Street Journal." The thought sent a chill through me. Going public would certainly destroy Patricia, but it would likely take the company, and all of us, down with her. "That's the nuclear option," Ralph warned. "We'd be collateral damage." "Some things are worth the sacrifice," Zuriel countered. Before I could respond, the door opened. Andres stood there, his expression carefully neutral. "They're ready for you, Marissa," he said. "Just you." My heart hammered against my ribs as I followed him back to the executive conference room. The board members sat in grim silence around the table. Patricia stood by the window, her back to the room, shoulders rigid with tension. The CEO gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit down, Marissa." I remained standing. "I prefer to stand, thank you." A flicker of respect crossed his face. "As you wish." "We've reviewed the evidence presented and heard Patricia's response." Patricia turned then, her face a mask of composed regret. Whatever she'd told them, she believed it had worked. "This situation is unprecedented," the CEO continued. "The allegations against Patricia are serious, but her contributions to this company have been significant." My stomach dropped. They were going to let her off the hook. "However," he continued, "the evidence is compelling, particularly the recording provided by Ralph." Patricia's mask slipped just for a moment, revealing naked fury beneath. "Before we make our final decision," the CEO said, "is there anything else you'd like to add, Marissa?" I looked at Patricia, really looked at her. For 5 years, I'd admired her, emulated her, desperately sought her approval. Even after discovering her betrayal, some part of me had still craved her recognition. That need had fueled my rage as much as the injustice itself. In that moment, I saw her clearly for the first time. Not a mentor, not a monster, just a deeply insecure woman who'd built her success on others' ideas because she feared her own inadequacy. "This isn't just about me," I said, addressing the board, "or even about Patricia. It's about the culture we've created, where results matter more than how they're achieved, where people like Patricia thrive because we reward them for stealing others' work." I placed my hands on the table, leaning forward. Every person Patricia has pushed out or pushed down represents lost potential for this company. Every idea she's stolen came from someone who could have contributed so much more if they'd been valued properly. Patricia scoffed. "Spare us the morality lecture. This company exists to make money, not coddle fragile egos." "Is that what you think happened here?" I turned to face her directly. That my fragile ego couldn't handle you taking credit for my work. I gave you opportunities, she hissed. I made your career. You used me, I corrected her. Just like you used Ralph and Zuriel and who knows how many others before us. You didn't make our careers. You built yours on our backs. Enough. The CEO's voice cut through our confrontation. Patricia, your employment with this company is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you to clear out your office. Patricia's face drained of colour. You can't be serious. After everything I've done for this company. After everything you've done to this company, one board member corrected. The potential lawsuits alone from your former subordinates could cost us millions. This isn't over, Patricia said, her voice deadly quiet as she gathered her things. You'll regret this decision. As she brushed past me toward the door, she paused. I made you, Marissa, she whispered. Everything you know, every connection you have, every skill you've developed, it all came from me. Remember that when you're celebrating your hollow victory. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow felt more final than a slam. Marissa, the CEO said after a moment, the board would like to discuss your future with the company. I blinked in surprise. My future? Patricia's departure leaves a significant leadership gap. Given your intimate knowledge of her clients and projects, you're uniquely positioned to step into that role. The offer hung in the air between us. Patricia's position, the very thing I'd coveted for years. The validation I'd sought, the power I'd envied. We'd need your answer by the end of the week, he continued. In the meantime, you'll have full access restored and… No. The word left my mouth before I'd fully processed the thought behind it. No. The CEO looked genuinely surprised. I don't want her position. The certainty in my voice surprised even me. Not like this. Not as a consolation prize or a convenient solution to your problem. This is a significant opportunity, Marissa. One that many would… I understand that. I straightened my shoulders. But I've spent 5 years trying to become Patricia. I don't want to step into her role. I want to create my own. I took a deep breath. If you're serious about changing the culture that allowed Patricia to thrive, then let's discuss what that looks like. Otherwise, I'll be submitting my resignation along with a detailed account of everything that's happened, including this conversation. The room fell silent. I'd just threatened the board of one of the largest consulting firms in the country. Career suicide by any rational measure. But standing there, I felt more certain than I had in months. Patricia hadn't made me. She'd nearly unmade me. And I was done letting her define my worth, my future, or my choices. The CEO studied me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. I think we have a lot to discuss, Marissa. Why don't you invite your colleagues to join us? As I turned to open the door, I caught my reflection in the window, shoulders back, head high, eyes clear. For the first time since this all began, I recognized myself again. Patricia was gone, and I was finally free. The negotiations with the board lasted until evening. By the time we emerged, the office had emptied, leaving behind the liminal quiet of abandoned desks and darkened monitors. Patricia's office door stood open, the room already half cleared by security. I paused in the doorway, taking in the bare shelves, the empty walls where her credentials had hung. 5 years of fearing and revering that space, and now it was just a room. Weird, isn't it? Ralph appeared beside me, seeing it empty. Like a spell breaking, I murmured. You could have taken it, you know. He leaned against the doorframe. Her job, her office. The board was practically begging you. And spend every day wondering if I got it because of merit or convenience. I shook my head. No thanks. Ralph studied me with newfound respect. So what happens now? With the ethics committee they're forming? I smiled, thinking of the board's faces when I'd proposed it. An internal watchdog group with real teeth, designed to prevent another Patricia from rising through the ranks. We start interviewing candidates next week, people from all levels of the company. I turned away from Patricia's empty office. It's a start. And your new role. Director of Organizational Integrity sounds impressive. It sounds made up, I laughed, which it basically is, but it gives me the authority to implement actual change. We walked toward the elevator in companionable silence. After everything, Ralph and I had reached an unexpected understanding. Not friendship exactly, but mutual respect forged in shared battle. "She called me, you know," he said as we waited for the elevator. "Patricia, right after she left." My stomach tightened. What did she want? To offer me a job at Meridian Consulting. Said she's landing on her feet and wanted to bring me along. Meridian, our biggest competitor. Of course Patricia would land there. "Are you going?" I kept my voice neutral. Ralph shook his head. "I'm done being someone else's stepping stone." The elevator arrived, but I hesitated before stepping in. "Why did you help us, Ralph?" "Really?" He considered the question, his usual glibness absent. "Because every time I looked at Patricia, I saw what I was becoming, and I didn't like it." The simple honesty of his answer stayed with me as I left the building. Sandra was waiting at our favourite wine bar, a bottle already open at our usual corner table. Her face broke into a relieved smile when she spotted me. "Well, don't keep me in suspense. What happened after the boardroom showdown?" I slid into the seat across from her, suddenly exhausted as the day's adrenaline ebbed. Patricia's gone, fired, and I turned down her job. Sandra's eyes widened. "You did what?" "I negotiated something better." I took a long sip of wine. Something that might actually matter. As I explained the ethics committee and my new role, Sandra's expression shifted from shock to understanding. "You're really not going to be satisfied with just winning, are you?" she asked. "You have to change the whole game." "Is that bad?" "It's very you." She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "I'm proud of you, Marissa. For standing up to Patricia, yes, but more for not becoming her in the process." Her words warmed something cold inside me. Throughout this ordeal, I'd feared I was crossing lines, becoming something I'd regret. Sandra had seen that danger before I had. "I almost did, you know," I admitted. "Become her." There were moments when all I wanted was to destroy her, regardless of the cost. But you didn't, because you wouldn't let me. I met her eyes. You kept questioning my motives, pushing back when I went too far. I resented it at the time, but thank you. Sandra raised her glass. To not becoming the people who hurt us. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the knot in my chest truly loosen. The next morning, I arrived early to clear out my old office. The company was reshuffling spaces and I'd be moving to a new floor, a physical, fresh start to match the professional one. As I packed my personal items, I discovered a small envelope that had been slipped under my door. Inside was a single key and a note in unfamiliar handwriting. Patricia kept records of everyone she ever used. The originals are in a storage unit. This key opens it. What you do with this information is up to you. A. Andres. Of course he would know. I sat at my desk, turning the key over in my hands. With these records, I could expose every instance of Patricia's theft over her entire career. I could contact her previous victims, build a case that would ensure she never worked in the industry again. Complete devastating revenge was literally at my fingertips. My phone buzzed with a text from Zuriel. "First ethics committee meeting set for Thursday. We're really doing this." I looked at the key again, then at the message. Two paths stretched before me, backward into Patricia's destruction, or forward into creating something better. Patricia's voice echoed in my mind. "I made you, Marissa." No, she hadn't made me. She'd nearly broken me. And the surest way to prove her wrong wasn't to destroy her. It was to build something she could never understand. I dropped the key into my desk drawer and texted Zuriel back. "We're really doing this. Send me the candidate list. I have some ideas." As I finished packing, I paused at my office window, looking out at the city stretching awake below. Somewhere out there, Patricia was already plotting her comeback, nursing her wounds, spinning her narrative. Let her. Her story wasn't mine anymore. I had my own to write,